Hello and welcome back. Before we start this Q&A, a couple of things I need to mention. Number one is thank you to everyone who took the time to send in a question. I'm always amazed when I go on YouTube and I go to the community tab and I say, hey, I'm going to do another Q&A. Does anybody have any questions? And like 50 people write in with questions. So that's pretty fantastic. The questions are primarily about photography and bookmaking, as to be expected. But there's also questions out of right field, and I'm going to treat all of these questions equally because I think they're all important. And if you're only doing photography and bookmaking in your life, you're probably not going to be very interesting, and I think it's more important to be well-rounded. So questions can be about anything. The second thing I need to say, and I always preface these Q&As by saying this, which is I am one person with one opinion. So you may listen to my opinion and totally disagree, and that is completely fine. All I'm trying to do is share some data that I've had by being around the photo world for basically about 30 years. And as you can imagine, a lot has changed in those 30 years. So if I have some little morsel of knowledge that helps you, then so be it. What I'm gonna do here is, I have so many questions, there's no possible way I can get through these in one Q&A. In fact, my goal is to get through about 12. Like I said, there's probably 60 or so questions that have come in so far. So I'm gonna have to do like 3 or 4 Q&As in a row here, which I'm gonna try to pull off right now, as a matter of fact. So let's get started. Number one question is how to approach galleries. I think there's 3 questions veiled in one. So this question number one is, how do you approach galleries? I didn't write people's names down on who submitted these questions because oftentimes on YouTube, people are using very strange handles and names that don't relate to actual human names, so there's no point in really me doing this, but it's a good question. The first question is how to approach galleries. Number one thing is, you have to understand whether or not your work is good enough to be in a gallery. And one of the great ways of doing that is to show your work at a portfolio review. And when I say portfolio review, I mean a real one. That happen a few times a year in the US. For example, Palm Springs Photo Festival, which is in Palm Springs, California, they offer a portfolio review series that you pay for. You go in and you have your work reviewed by editors, agents, art buyers, gallerists, curators, collectors. These are legitimate people that it is worth your time to pay to analyze your work. And they'll let you know very quickly whether or not your work is at a level that's ready for a gallery. They're typically not gonna slay you if your work isn't great. They're not gonna say your work's not great. They're gonna say you're gonna need to improve, or maybe this is an image that looks good and might take you in this direction. The other thing to do is, if your work is at a level that's gallery ready, you should study the galleries in detail that you're approaching. Study their rosters. Who are they already representing? Now, one of the misconceptions about galleries is, say for example, you're a photojournalist and you see there's a gallery in California that just did a show with a famous photojournalist. And a lot of photographers will think to themselves, oh wow, that gallery just showed photojournalism and showed this other show. I'm gonna send my work to that gallery. The problem is, for a high-end photo gallery, they often are not gonna have an entire stable of photojournalists. They're gonna have 1 or 2. So if you're a photojournalist throwing your hat in the same ring, the gallery may look and say, why would we take you on as a photojournalist? We already have 2 of the best photojournalists. So potentially look for a gallery that doesn't have someone represented whose work looks like yours. Look also for galleries that are a blend of photography and contemporary art. There's a lot of advantages to the contemporary art world over the photography world, especially when it comes to being in galleries and museums. That's another point to keep in mind. And also, the last thing I'm going to say about galleries, this is a business. This is not a feel-good, oh, we love your work, it's not going to sell, but we're going to show it anyway kind of thing. Galleries are in business to make money. And this is true of all aspects of photography. There's a lot of people floating around online in photography who want to make believe that everything is noble and sacred in photography. There's a lot of photographers who want you to believe that they're high-level photographers, but they would never compromise. That is simply not true. Photography, like any other business, is about making money. So, case in point, a little example I'll give you. Years ago, I went to a panel in Los Angeles at a big photography event, and there was a panel of gallery owners. And the crowd was asking the gallery owners questions, and they were answering, but they were answering with all the questions that you would expect a public-facing figure to say. They were being politically correct. They weren't exactly being truthful. And someone asked one of the gallery owners in particular what it would take to get a show at his gallery. And his first response was $35,000. And he did not hesitate. He was waiting for this question. And his response was 35 grand. You want to do a show at my gallery? It's going to take 35 grand. Can you sell 35 grand worth of prints? Because that's what it takes me to, my overhead. My monthly overhead is paying my staff, paying utilities, framing, mounting, marketing, all that stuff. It's 35 grand. So are you going to sell 35 grand worth of work? I've also seen less than stellar photographers, I mean really not good photographers at all, get show after show after show because they are connected, right? They can guarantee to that gallery owner that they are going to sell X amount of work on an opening night. I know someone who sold 6 figures worth of prints on opening night, and the photographs, you know, frankly, they're not very good, but the person is connected. So again, this is a game. The galleries, the art world, etc. It's a game as well as a business. And some people are incredibly good at playing it and others are never going to be. My experience with galleries is mostly failure. I have been in galleries before. I've had shows, I've had solo shows and I've had group shows. But I was never a huge fan of the experience of a photo gallery because they were too quiet, too sterile. And in Los Angeles, where I was living, a lot of times when you would go to gallery openings, it was really more about who was in attendance than the actual work itself. Everyone in the gallery was turned towards the center of the room, looking at each other, as opposed to looking outside to the walls of the actual work. And that always rubbed me the wrong way. So that's my take on galleries. Some people love it, other people drives them crazy, turns them inside out. If you want to throw your hat in that ring, go for it. Just enjoy it. Don't take it too seriously and realize how fickle that entire industry is. That's my opinion based on looking at all of my friends have interactions with galleries over the years. But well, I'm going to end with one thing. I'm glad they're there. My favorite gallery is Fahey Klein in Los Angeles. That's run by David Fahey, who's just an amazingly nice individual and very giving and caring and educational. So he represents a lot of photographers that I really like, and he's a very cool human being. So if you want to see what a beautiful high-end gallery looks like, Fahey Klein is a good place to start. Question number 2. On the next Q&A, it would be great if you could discuss, in regards to one of the questions already posed, how you differentiate between long-term projects and micro projects. Good question. Besides the obvious, in other words, is there a difference between long-term projects and micro in terms of length of time? So this is a great question. And I think especially during a COVID year, I think there's a lot of documentary photographers who are kind of in the same boat. And also, the lifestyle of being a photographer has changed. The 80s are dead. The 90s are dead. The early 2000s are dead. Photographers now are wearing 6 or 7 different hats at the same time. And so the size of the hats have changed. The hat of being a photographer is a lot less about making pictures, and it's a lot more about things like marketing and building audience and building following and all of this stuff that back in the 80s and 90s, we didn't have to do. And the photographers who didn't learn how to do this modern era, they're gone. They're pretending that they're going to have a career again. Sadly, it's not going to happen. Micro projects have taken on a completely different relevance. So for me personally, I stopped working as a photographer in 2010. I do not identify with being a photographer, and I never will again. My whole life used to be about doing long-term projects, right? I would do commercial photography, you know, portraiture, weddings, whatever it was to make money, and then I would take all my free time and I would go do projects. I haven't done that since 2010. But what I can do since 2010 are micro projects. So for someone like me, the long-term projects are a fallacy that I'm never going to be able to do again. And what's compensated are these little micro projects that simply allow me to be creative. I'm not showing them to people. I'm not asking for respect. I'm not making prints. I'm not trying to sell them. I'm not trying to pretend that I'm a photographer. They are simply done 100% for personal and private reasons. And that is totally enough for me. And I'm not saying I'm normal or that you should do the same or you should feel the same. I'm just saying that micro projects, even though they're not as in-depth, they may not be as good, they may not have long-term impact. That is all I am capable of at this point because my job takes so much of my time. And I cannot imagine that ever changing. And frankly, I don't know if I want it to change. You know, back when I was doing long-term projects, there was still a glimmer of hope that someone might run one of those projects. That hope is gone. I can't imagine, like for example, the project I'm working on right now, there is not a magazine in the world that would run that story. And if they did, they wouldn't pay me enough to make it worth my while anyway. So the only hope I would have with a project like that would be to either try to sell a book run, which I'm never gonna make enough money to survive on, etc. You see where I'm going here. That's the whole, the sort of commercial professional side of being a photographer that I left behind in 2010. Now I can work on the project like I'm doing now and just enjoy the process. And if I make a single copy of a single book for myself, I'm totally thrilled and happy with it, and I'm jazzed, and I just go do another project. Micro or macro, whatever works for you, they are completely valid. And my guess is as a photographer, you will continue to bounce from one to the other based on your lifestyle and the outside demands on your life. It's all good. Anybody who has the ability and has the time to make photographs, or even sit around and talk about photographs like we're doing now, it kind of puts us in that, you know, privileged category of, you know, we're the lucky ones. Question number 3, procrastination. I'm sure it depends on what you're trying to accomplish on some level, but I was wondering if you could share some thoughts on that. I get a lot of questions about procrastination, which is a little bit baffling to me, and I'm fortunate in the sense that I have never had that problem. And there are times when I wish I did, because I think I would have had a lot less stress in my life. But I don't procrastinate because my wish list and my to-do list is so long that I know I'm never going to get to all of it. Even if everything went perfectly well in my life. Let's say, for example, I won the lottery and I said to Blurb, you know what? It's been real. I love this job, but I don't need it anymore. I have all the money I'm ever going to use. I don't need to work anymore. And I just turned around and I walked into the world and I could do anything I want. I would still not get everything done. And that fire underneath me is burning all day, 24 hours a day. When I wake up at 2 in the morning, my brain is going to what I want to accomplish. And I think part of that is that I'm continually trying to educate myself, right? I'm a product of public school in America, which, you know, you may have a wonderful feeling about that or not so wonderful. But, you know, I have a college degree and I kind of feel like I still don't know anything. So right off camera here, that you can't see, is the stack of books that I just picked up from the library. There's 4 in the stack. And that is something I do every day as I read and I try to educate myself. I'm also trying to learn a variety of things. And because of that, when you open your brain up to what's happening in the world or just knowledge in general, it will light a fire under you that you will never be able to put out. And you have to realize you're never going to get to everything, but man, is there a ton of stuff to do and a ton of stuff to learn. Turn off your television, don't surf the web, and delete all your social media. That right there will give you enough time to actually go and educate yourself. None of those 3 things are helping you. Your television isn't helping you if you're sitting around watching TV for no reason, if you're surfing the web for no reason about content that has no relevance to your life whatsoever, or you're spending any of your time on social media pretending to be someone you're not. Eliminate those and move on, and your procrastination, I can guarantee you, will fall down in terms of relevance in your life. You will be, your hair will be on fire and you'll be ready to rock. Question number 4. This is about text in a photography book and whether or not you should do a book with no text, text as a description, text as technical info, or text as thoughtful introspection that is complementary to an image. This is a good question. The answer lies in what kind of publication you are making. For example, a portfolio is very different from a book. A portfolio is just a sample of your best work, but may or may not tell a story. A book, on the other hand, contains a narrative, a story arc, and you are trying to tell a story. And so you might need copy. You might need text. In fact, I can almost guarantee you're going to need some sort of text. But even with a portfolio, maybe you put a bio in the back, because if someone is intrigued by your work, they're also going to wonder who you are as a person, whether or not they can trust you, what your knowledge base is, can they leave you with a client, all of those different things. Adding in a little bit of humor in your bio, always a good thing. The one question you ask in here, the one subcategory that you can eliminate right off the bat is technical info. No one cares about photographic technical info besides geeky photographers. If your market is geeky photographers, and I'm not joking about that, because if you look at YouTube, the vast majority of photography channels are intended for geeky photographers. No one else is watching, fluoride elements in a lens or what 50mm is the best on a Fuji camera. Nobody in the real world cares. The only people who care are other geeky photographers. The flip side of that is a huge market. So if you're intending to make a publication to sell to geeky photographers, they're going to look for that technical info. The people who I want to put my books in front of do not care about cameras or tech or any of that stuff. They're looking to be inspired by what the images represent. And then also one idea I want to give you too is a lot of times people will come to me, and I've heard this quote 10,000 times in the last 10 years, which is, quote, well, I'm making a Blurb book and I know I have to do captions, end quote. And my question is always, why? Are the caption police going to come to your house and force you to do captions? You don't have to do anything. You can do whatever you want. And also remember, if you put captions under a photograph, you're now asking the viewer to do two things at once. You're asking them to look at your photograph, and you're also asking them to digest the copy. And my guess is, based on data from museums around the world, they will spend more time reading your caption than looking at your photograph. So why not put the caption in the back in an index and just allow them to do one thing at a time, which is look at photographs. Those are all little, subtle things that you can pick up on or refine your system based on practice in making publications. Question number 5. Thanks, I'm late to the party. How did you know there's a party? I mean, it's early, but right off camera here, there's a huge rager going on in my bedroom. I'm late to the party, but I have a question for the next Q&A. Do you have any thoughts or tips regarding typography? Oh man, I can't believe you wrote that in right now. I'm putting together a few Blurb books and I feel completely overwhelmed by the vast number of fonts, typefaces available to choose. I'd pick 2 per publication, but don't know where to start. You already have started and you already made a monumentally big decision, which was deciding on going with 2 typefaces. And that is really intelligent. 2, 3 at the outside, at the wide margin of what you want to try to use. Anything more and it looks like type just spilled out on your computer and you decided to use everything. I just wrote a post for Blurb, about a 1,000-word post. That's about typography, things about, type size, choosing a typeface, the difference between typeface and a font, and also type hierarchy. And I think type hierarchy is a great thing to keep in mind for anyone doing a photography book, because type hierarchy, if I can explain this, is basically coming up with a consistent pattern of typographical use that once the viewer sees it the first time, they recognize immediately what the hierarchy of the text represents. For example, a caption in all caps with technical information italicized. They see that one time underneath the photograph and your brain says, oh, the all caps is the caption, but I'm after the technical information, it's going to be in italic. And so that's called type hierarchy. It's been a struggle to get that word out today. Don't judge me. That's it. Choose 2. Also, last thing I'll say on type, the post will come out in January, I think, or maybe February. So keep an eye out for that. Sign up. If you haven't signed up to receive Blurb emails, I know what you're going to say. You're going to say, they're going to send me too many. And my answer is going to be probably. But it's worth to sign up because you're going to get all the discounts, you're going to get all the new announcements, and you're going to get alerted to things like the blog where you can find these in-depth articles. I'm not sure if I mentioned this on any film yet. I have about 130 blog posts on my plate to write for Blurb. And in 2021, the Blurb blog is going to get a lot of love, which is great because it's a really good resource. And these are more longer posts than I normally write, and they're more technical. So they're about things like typography. I also just wrote one about mirrorless cameras versus DSLRs. And these are not topics that I come up with necessarily. They're topics that they're curious about and like, hey, Milner, what do you know about this? And could you write something? And so it's pretty fun. It takes up a lot of my time. I'm on the hook for writing, a lot of these. So typography is a language in itself, as is page design. So if you're new to bookmaking, don't stress, don't freak out, don't think you're going to make something perfect. Just enjoy the process of learning as you go. Make little sample books, small, inconsequential, inexpensive sample books to test things like typography. Take a single line of copy All work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. And print it at 9-point, 10-point, 12-point, 14-point, 16-point, and print it in a book so that you can physically see it. And then, oh, by the way, take 6 or 10 different fonts that you think you like that work with your project and print them all. Print that same line of copy in all 6 fonts, and then keep that as a resource for all your future publications. See how much work I just saved you? Question number 6. I would like to get your take on framing via a viewfinder versus framing via screen. I feel like there is an aesthetic difference. I personally crave to look through the viewfinder, not so much for getting everything just perfect, but to give the moment more intentionality. I agree with you. A connection that I struggle with when I'm using a screen. I'm clinging to film for the same reason. The camera connects me to the feeling of purposefulness. I'm probably making more of it than necessary. You're only making more of it than necessary. Well, I don't think you are making it more. If this is what's important to you, a feeling of connectedness and purposefulness, and that's what you get by looking through the viewfinder, then you somewhat answered your own question. The reason I'm not a good person to answer this is I have never once shot pictures with my camera holding out like this and looking at a screen. And for me personally, I've never seen a professional photographer do that. I've seen a lot of people who claim to be professionals who aren't, who do that. To me, it's a sign of, it's kind of an amateur way of shooting. And I know it's probably me and I'm probably missing something and I probably should be doing this. But why on earth would I do that? It's the same reason I don't really make pictures with my mobile phone. I don't want to walk around like this making photographs. I love a viewfinder. And the viewfinder eliminates everything else in the world, and all you have to do is think and look about what's in this little rectangle or square. I love it. I would never photograph and hold my camera out like this. That just seems bizarre. The other thing that I'll tell you is I am right-handed, but I am left-eye dominant. And I guess that's weird, which is no big surprise knowing what you know about me. And the reason I know this is that when I was little, I did a lot of shotgun shooting. I did a lot of bird hunting, and I shot a lot of skeet and trap, international trap, sporting clays, etc. For anyone who knows shotgun games, you'll know what I'm talking about. And when I was young, there was a coach for one of the US teams who saw me shooting as a little kid and approached my father and said, hey, when your son is younger or older, we would like to talk about maybe including him on one of the teams. And so my father was kind of stoked about that. Didn't really care. My dad was like, oh yeah, that sounds great. And so the coach took me out to the shooting range one day, and I had my shooting glasses on, and he's taped over my lenses with tape, like opaque tape I couldn't see through. And I was like, what's going on? And he said, I need to find out where your dominance is. And he goes, it's weird, you're right-handed, but you're left eye dominant. So I use my left eye to shoot. So the camera is blocking my right eye, which makes it even more isolating to look through a viewfinder, and isolating in a good way. Again, I don't want to hold my camera out like this. It just seems bizarre. But again, I spent, 30 years of my life looking through a viewfinder, and that's natural to me. So I would go that route. I think I'm with you on the connectivity and purposefulness of doing that. Question number 7. On a side note, do you see a difference between JPEG and PNG photos when making a blurb photo book? No, I don't see a difference. They look the same. Now, where you will see a difference potentially is in the difference between using Blurb Bookright and using Adobe InDesign and rendering text, like a page of copy, a page of 2 columns or 3 columns, and a PDF will render text differently from a JPEG file. But I've never had someone say to me, hey, I used Bookright, ran a lot of copy, and boy, I didn't like the way it rendered. So technically, I mean, you may be looking for something that's nearly imperceptible, so I wouldn't worry about it. Question number 8, am I going to shoot film again? That's a good question. The odds are less and less likely that I will do that. And I love film. I spent my entire life making pictures on film. I think all of the best work I've ever done is on film. I had a dream the other day of flying to Peru with a bag of film in my Leica M4 and just traveling until I ran out of film. That's never going to happen, but it's never going to happen because of logistics and because of what the demands on me in my career. I am creating work for a variety of different people and reasons, and those reasons require digital as the means of doing so. So I can't do what I'm doing for my job and use film. So I have hundreds and hundreds of rolls of film in both 35, 120, 220. I have 4x5. I still have a 4x5 camera. I have a 4x5 pinhole. I have all my medium format stuff, my 35 stuff. And again, I love it and I love the cameras, but logistically it doesn't work and the demands on me don't work. So if I was to go to Peru, I'm certainly not going to go to Peru and not produce a wide range of content because I have those demands on me. Again, if I won the lottery and I didn't have any demands on me, then maybe I would do that, because it would be a lot of fun to go back with the Leica and a bag of Tri-X and make pictures like I used to. I would love that, but probably not likely. Question number 9, how is the XT4 and Sony ZV1? How are they working out for you? They're both great, but to be perfectly frank, I've used both of them so little that it would be ridiculous for me to bother really telling you in depth. I'm using the XT4 right now. The image stabilization is great. It's durable. I've got the booster on it. The batteries last a lot longer than the XT2. The autofocus is way better. But again, I've probably used it, really seriously used it once or twice since I've owned it. The Sony is incredible because it's this big. And one of the things that I have to do now that really kind of is somewhat revolting to me is I have to film myself when I'm in the field. And for anyone who grew up in my generation, this is very disconcerting, right? We aimed our cameras into the world, not back at ourselves. And when the internet came around and social came around, that flipped. And suddenly the photographer became part of the process, of the story. And that's still foreign to me. But the problem is when I'm making these films, I have to have enough footage to make a film. And so that requires me photographing myself sometimes. And so the Sony's amazing because it fits in my pocket and it has that little controller tripod that's very tiny. And I just carry it in my pocket and then I can put it on the ground and sort of add a second or third camera view to what I'm doing. And again, when I'm doing this in my head, I'm like, oh man, I can't believe I'm doing this. I'd much rather just be focusing on the story. But again, learning filmmaking has been one of the best things that has come out of 2020 for me. In a year that I think all of us would probably give a 1-star rating for 2020. Trying to learn filmmaking has been fun. And I am nowhere near the level in that process that I really want to be. But both cameras are great. Can't go wrong if you're going to buy either one of them. I wouldn't hesitate. Question number 10, what projects am I working on and what would I do if I could? That's a good question. Well, again, I mean, I wrote a letter the other day to a friend of mine, and then I converted it into binary code, and then I printed the binary code and mailed it to him with just a little handwritten thing that said, when you receive this, email me for further instructions. And so he will email me, and then I will copy the binary code and email it to him, and then he'll have to put it in a binary code converter to figure out what my letter said. Now, that might sound juvenile and trivial and a waste of time, but it's not, because that's just a little tiny creative thing that I was able to do during the day when I'm in like 4.5 hours of conference calls, writing blog posts and doing all the stuff for work. That's a little creative outlet. The only real photo project I have right now is based in California, and I'm only able to get there a couple of times a year, and it's a needle in a haystack project. It's not easy. And so I don't really have a lot of projects going. And if I suddenly didn't have to work and I could do anything I want, it would take me a bit of time to figure out what I would want to do. I would probably do an extensive writing project. There's a screenplay, 2 screenplay ideas I have that I'd like to write. I've never written a screenplay. That would take me forever. And I would probably just diversify. You know, I'd keep reading a lot, maybe try some conceptual projects, because I'm not so great at those. I spent my life sort of as a linear, you know, documentary kind of photographer, and I'd like to break out of that a bit. Question number 11, and there's two questions left, 11 and 12. Question number 11 is about Wim Hof, and what do I feel about Wim Hof breathing techniques? And if you don't know Wim Hof, I think he's either German or Dutch. And he's a guy, he's kind of a unique dude. He's basically, his deep breathing techniques, I think, and I'm by no means an expert on this at all. In fact, I don't know that much about it. I think it's a deep breathing system that is basically allows you to deal with extremely cold environments. I think the camera just cut off at 30 minutes, but this is two final questions. So I think Wim Hof is about how to survive in cold weather environments, and also how to, the benefits of deep breathing. And the only thing I can say to that is, for thousands of years before Wim Hof, humans were doing deep breathing. Yoga, in fact, was a mental breathing exercise for 1,000 years before it was a physical exercise. So I am 100% believer in what deep breathing is able to do in terms of benefit for humans, regardless of who you are or why you're using it. And I think it's something that's completely accessible to all human beings because we all breathe. And so learning how to control your breath, because I love yoga. I do yoga like 5 days a week. And I always run into people who go, well, I can't do it because I'm not flexible. And I'm like, yoga has nothing to do with flexibility at all. Flexibility is a byproduct of doing yoga, but yoga is about your mind and it's about breathing. And you can alternate those in terms of relevance. Breathing might be the single most important aspect, and your headspace is the second, or vice versa. And people are terrified of that because it sort of goes against what they think about yoga. The physical part of yoga, again, yes, I do that 5 days a week, but I don't even really think about it. I'm so conditioned into the same routine that I've done for years and years and years. What the yoga provides me, I think, is a little bit of what Wim Hof is providing people, which is this mental escape. And when you learn command of your breath, it's incredibly powerful, and it's also just a lot of fun. It's about the physics of your body and understanding how they work. So I'm a fan of Wim Hof. I have friends here in town, they're not close friends, who have a cold tank in their backyard, and they are complete devotees of Wim Hof. So they're doing cold dunks in their yard. I don't care if it's 15 degrees, they're out there in this cold tank. I would die. I would literally just immediately freeze. I would be like the Terminator in like whatever it was, Terminator 6, where they freeze him and then they hit him and he just blasts into a million pieces. That would be me. I suck in cold weather. Last question. Here's a question regarding projects I've been internally debating for some time. Moving forward, would you start a project with photography that you have yet to take, or would you add and use archived work that fits the theme? Question is based on me having 15 years worth of UK forest-based motorsport images from back when I was a child freelancer. I feel there is a story to tell, but wonder if that ship has sailed and it would be better printed a publication full of archived work, or do I just put that in the drive in the attic and start afresh? My guess is if you're talking about UK-based forest auto racing, you're talking about rally. Rally racing here in America, when you mention rally, most people go, I have no idea what you're talking about. I happen to love rally racing. And I fell in love with rally racing back in the 80s when I was in middle school, because I think they were showing it on ESPN when ESPN was new. Because I remember, I think it was the Swedes at the time. The Swedish drivers were like dominating. There was some guy named Henriksen or Magnussen or something like that. And he was, you know, Nico or Tico or something like that. And he was just blazing away in these little Fiats. And I think this was pre-Subaru. It was, I can't remember the brand. Was it Lancia? Anyway, if I love old 80s rally, then there's probably a lot of other people that love it. So you have options. You can definitely do a book of the archival footage, because I think rally sort of peaked in popularity during that time. So I'm sure that the rally audience, and you have your audience built in. A rally audience is hardcore. And so if you know, it's not like you're doing an ethereal photography book where you're like, I don't know who the audience is. You know who it is. What you could also do is think about doing 2 volumes. You could do an old archived volume and you could do a modern volume and design them identically so that they could fit in a little slipcover and you'd have like old and new. Just because work is old doesn't mean it's irrelevant. You know, going out and creating an entirely new body of rally racing is going to take you years. And so why not work with what you have? The final choice would be to blend the two, but I would take the existing footage you have and I would start to work out things like your design, your trim size, your paper type, your overall page layouts, your typography, and just work with what you have. Wait till COVID is done and then try to get back out and maybe start building on it. But I think they are both completely and utterly valid. All the best work I've done is old. I'm sick of looking at it. I have no interest in making books out of it. I have no interest in making prints and selling prints. I can't think of anything I'd rather do less, but I realize I don't have the ability to go make new work. So if I'm going to do anything with my own photography, it is based on old stuff that I'm sick of. So I hope that was helpful. Again, I'm going to turn right around right now and do the next Q&A because I have so many questions. Again, I'm one person with one opinion. Take it for what it is. If you don't agree, that's totally fine. And I appreciate everyone who took the time to send in their questions, and I hope everyone is winding down the year as best they can. Adios.